If you're a new brand, you don't want to just assume something's going to work. So you definitely throw a lot at the wall at the start. You can't just kind of dip toe in and spend like 10 bucks a day here and there. Oh, this video from, influencer A didn't work. Let's go into product shots. You really want to get different styles of creators, different styles of shots, lifestyle shots, different people holding the product, different color schemes. Don't be dedicated to like only your brand colors on day one. As a new brand, like one of your advantages is you're still kind of figuring out what consumers are reacting to. Don't just go in with, here's our goals, here's our brand colors, work within these restrictions. Like that is a huge roadblock. It's going to be hard to make that work. You're just assuming that, this is going to work at the masses, right?
I just got back from D2C Newsletter's C-Suite Mastermind in Las Vegas, and I gotta tell you that this room of 100 D2C and retail operators were just buzzing about TapCart mobile shopping apps. A lot of the brands in the room are already using TapCart, and the ones who weren't are thinking about it because a mobile app is going to improve your retention. It's also going to allow you to diversify your distribution strategies, which has never been more important. And more than that, your customers are just going to love it. Mobile app users have proven to be bigger diehard fans of your brand. They've got higher conversion rates, revenue per session, and LTV compared to users that come to your web-based store. Just like fashion brand Princess Polly, who launched their app in 2019 using TapCart and now consistently see 20 to 25% of their revenue coming from this channel. It's their second highest revenue channel after their online store. With TapCart, it's incredibly easy to build, launch, and maintain your mobile apps. So to learn more, go right now to tapcart.com/DTC. That's tapcart.com/DTC. Tell them Eric sent you. It's all killer, no filler. I'm Eric. This is the D2C podcast. It is Wednesday because that's a ball hockey day, and I'm here with my defense partner, Cam Wind.
Let's go.
Let's bring ball hockey into the all killer, no filler podcast. Scored 4 slap shot goals last week. Just no big deal. Let's get into it, though. We got Jacob here from the pilot program over at Pilothouse. And, you're in a unique position, Jacob, with the pilot program in that you're dealing with a lot of brands that sort of have that initial traction but haven't scaled into really big numbers yet. You're getting to work with them on a real one-on-one basis. So you're getting to see some of the things that these brands are doing that are real opportunities to get traction and to scale, as well as you're seeing some of the oopsies, the ops and oopsies, we're calling them, in terms of some of the mistakes that might be made. And ultimately what we're trying to do is you're dealing with brands that are getting into the market and maybe they don't have the assets, they don't have the time in market of a lot of these like legacy big digitally native brands. But what we're here to talk about is a little bit is how they can really get to that level playing field sooner and thrive. What would you say, Jacob?
No, yeah, totally. With today's like playing field, the reach of today's platforms, you really can make an impact right away. Consumers have quick attention span. So if you can make a really good first impression, you might, optically be seen on the same level as the big guys right away. And, from there on, your product can do the talking. So yeah, I know we're going to get into some of that, but excited to be here.
And you have to pretty much too, right? You can't, if no one's operating charities out there, no one's coming to a site and be like, oh, cute, they look like a real first starting brand. You need to, if you want to hit the ground running, you got to have a few of these things. So let's talk about what are the big opportunities you see for these smaller brands to appear bigger, appear more established sometimes.
Yeah, there's definitely quite a few. So you have your brand, you have a few sales, you feel like you're ready to enter the paid advertising world. You want to make sure you do it right. You don't want to kind of dip your toes in here and there. You want to, attack it with everything you can. And for, not much capital, there's ways to optically appear large. The first one, social proof, just the idea of social proof. And, this leading into things like getting influencers on board, getting people posting about you, getting reviews, testimonials, potentially, attending online events, things like this. As seen on is a big one. You can go and you can, pay a couple $100. You can get your brand featured on, multiple publications. You put that right on your homepage there, and as seen on Forbes, ABC, and it is like you are hosted on those sites, and there's aggregators you can go through for things like that. So just thinking about those things right at the start, and making sure you're not kind of going through those as you begin advertising, but doing those before you get into it.
And when it comes to reviews and things like that, those are tough. I guess you really want to lean on your friends and family, your initial network there, kind of to make sure that there's a good blanket of reviews. How do you recommend people go about that?
Yeah, I mean, you want to get an app installed right away, a review app through Shopify or whatever, site you're using, just so anyone organically buying is, hit with the leave a review pop-up. Like you said, send it out to your community, family, friends, anyone purchasing. And then you can start to run, review focus campaigns, which kind of leads into the next opportunity. As you are a small brand and you start to do those things, you don't want to necessarily go 100%, let's get sales with 100% of our budget. There is going to be an essence of like engagement, branding. And one good example of that is you look at brands, their feed, their posts, they have like one like on a post, their organic posts. So you might want to put $5 behind that a day. You might want to, optimize for engagement. You might want to start getting 100, 200 likes living on your feed. So when people organically are looking at your brand, they're like, oh, these guys are big. And there's, again, ways to do that with very limited budget and just building that up before you spend all your budget on sales focused ads is going to go a long way.
And then when it comes to your ad mix, like, how do you think of, you go, so say, another note you have here is to use the ad library to really go and see who your competitors are and see the ad mix that they're using, the different kinds of looks that they're kind of giving to their products. How do you think about how you split up your ad budget between maybe little things, obviously small amounts, like for things like engagement posts? How do you think about spreading out budget between these like critical angles?
Yeah, so it's definitely like a 90-10 type situation with 10% being engagement, branding. Once maybe a few, weeks, months down the road, as you're kind of diving into more performance focused stuff, you're going to put most of your budget into that because those are the consumers that are buying. You want to optimize to purchases. You want to get, not just the comment dwellers or the newsfeed dwellers that just like whatever they see. At the start, that's good to build up your optics, but then on the back side, you want sales. So yeah, definitely thinking of that and using the ads library, looking up the big guys, the big competitors. What ads are they running? Why are they running those? Why aren't what aren't they running? There's just so much to be perceived from looking right at those ad libraries.
I feel like it's such an underrated way to use ad libraries, especially in Meta, is looking at timeline. So if you hop in there and you can see that X monster brand has been running 100 ads across Meta, you can actually see the timeline. Everything's sorted by chronological order. If you see that they're running content for a long period of time, it's very likely that they're seeing some form of return. So you can kind of synthesize however you choose, but you can break down their video content and their static content and say, okay, is there a way that we can replicate this in a way that is true to our brand? And it's just like an easy way to get a head start on what likely is winning content for other big brands.
I like that. And then Jacob, within the paid side and the non-engagement branding side, within the performance side, how do you determine how you're going to go to market with, let's say, like influencer dark posts versus video ads versus statics? Like what is the sort of breakdown we look at when we launch clients? I guess it's going to be brand specific, but how do you think about that?
Definitely. So I mean, at the start, if you're a new brand, you don't want to just assume something's going to work. So you definitely throw a lot at the wall at the start. And this is another point in terms of mistakes, which I guess we'll get into the second part. But
Oopsies, we're calling them.
Oopsies, yeah. You can't just kind of dip toe in and spend like $10 a day here and there. Oh, this video from influencer A didn't work. Let's go into product shots. You want to make sure you have, a few different influencers on board. And it honestly doesn't need to be influencers on board, just, user generated content that people have made for you. you want, different styles of influencers. If you're going to do 3 to 5 pieces of content, don't get 3 of similar creators, get 3 completely different creators. Similar with product style shots, like 3 to 5 pieces of content, completely different. Run all these small budgets. Again, it doesn't require much, like 50 to 150 a day. And you are all of a sudden starting to see pretty quickly, based on, add to cart rates, initiate checkouts, like, oh, this style of creator is working, this style of product shot. Like, all these things are going to work. There's ways to make them work. You don't want to exclude them. It's just about figuring out, what is going to work. So getting a lot at the start, and then running a nice clean test on that with some budget is definitely a good way to go about it. And then obviously as you go, you iterate, right, and lean into what's working. So
actually, I think there's been some interesting examples in the podcast, in the newsletter lately of like some founding teams doing some really good content. I think like founder content is probably a term that we use a lot, probably overused, but you talk about creator content, so often it doesn't have to actually be a founder, but someone on your team who's just like really good with their iPhone. We can create content at a really, really high like volume, and can kind of like fill some of these gaps that you're talking about. Just do it internally, just get it done quick. So, like, I love the fact that video content is being skewed towards, like the native style based off of how people are using Reels and TikTok. So that means that there's so many people who can create content for brands now and can do it quickly. So like Pretty Boy is, the founders over at Pretty Boy, like they shot some content that's performing really well that we featured in the newsletter last week. Like it's really easy content in a lot of ways to create. So there's some simple examples.
And founder stories never underestimate. Like, I think a lot of people have imposter syndrome, like, oh, people don't care about my story or this or that. But especially now more than ever, people are looking to connect with the stories behind the brands that they're in. So do not hesitate to be testing founder story content as well.
It's another comment I was going to make to you on like your very first thing, Jacob, on like social proof. I also feel like if you're running a small team for like an e-com brand, don't sleep on the fact that if you're creating if you have a product that genuinely creates a positive emotion for your consumers, like don't be afraid to follow up with them. Like I feel like I'm even experiencing this on like the Pilothouse side. If your customers are genuinely enjoying a product and you can engage with them in a positive way through social, whatever medium it may be, it's very likely they're going to want to hop on a call with you or provide some form of content in exchange for whether it be like free product, some small incentive, whatever it may be. And it creates this like engine of content that you can use, whether it be video, written, whatever it may be, that you can use for like the social proof that you're talking about. So it doesn't always have to be like some big fancy app that you can use, just like genuine engagement with your customers. I feel like creates like a wealth of content that you can use in a variety of ways.
I love that. The other piece that was something that came up a couple times at C-Suite in Las Vegas was people suggesting person on the street interview style things where you literally have a question about your product, like the Pepsi taste test challenge or something like that. You're literally going out and having people engage with your product, recording it, asking interesting questions. Literally everyone can do this, and those videos get watched like crazy on these social platforms.
Yeah. Super low cost to make. You can edit it yourself right in TikTok. You got whatever promo like creatives to make, get in Canva, like make a few styles. And again, it's just trying to figure out what's going to work there. And then you can really dive deep after that. So totally. Yeah.
Nice. What's another opportunity that that smaller brands might have to stand out?
I mean, just thinking of a new versus existing customer, I feel like a lot of bigger brands fall into the trap where they just assume like everyone knows about them, and they're just like, buy our stuff, whatever, we're the best. As a new brand, like focusing on a new customer, trying to bring them into your industry, into your market, not necessarily just to your company, but getting them interested in your product niche or whatever it may be. And that sort of leads back into the other things like the social proof, maybe scrappier like content from the founder. Like these are the type of things that's going to attract someone into that versus like here's another boring product shot. Like Nike, for example, it works because they're Nike, but it's just nice polished product shots. That's all it is, right? At least on Meta. So
And
yeah.
I'd use this as an opportunity. I'd bring up something else that happened in one of the hot seats where someone had a really innovative product that did some really cool things, but they were advertising it in terms of like these sort of obscure terms. It was a water company who was talking about alkalinity and about getting rid of fluoride and getting minerals back in the water. And it was all this stuff that was sort of abstract that sounded good, but it wasn't really focused on like the actual problems that it solved. It was focused on people understanding these like higher level concepts rather than the emotions that were actually behind behind why people would want this product. And so I think in the hot seat, we really helped them focus in on a message that would be more general without assuming that people already know the nitty gritty of your product or product category. So drill that layer deeper and focus on the pain points that your problem actually addresses, and ramp up some of the fear of what life would be like without your product, kind of thing.
Or just dumb stuff down.
Sure, yeah.
How do I say this in a more simpler way? Like that was a big takeaway that I took from it too. People, especially if you have some kind of a technical product, it's like, how do we make this more easily, accessible, understandable for the broader group of people?
Yeah. Here's your issue. Here's our product. The perfect answer. For sure. So I mean, I think like just thinking of those messaging, differences of new versus existing, splitting them out from testing right at the start, like as you're testing your creative, maybe test them on both funnels and, split those audiences out, start to see what is working. Once people come in through those, longer form ads that address their pain points, all this stuff, maybe they don't need that. Maybe they do just need to see your products. So really kind of thinking of that from the start is going to go a long way, because you're also going to get that feedback back quicker. Yeah.
And so that's again, like 90% of your budget would go towards new, I would imagine, right? And then you just be, for the existing, it would just be retargeting existing customers or retargeting people that had already got to a certain point in your funnel?
Yeah, exactly. People that have visited the site once they've kind of engaged, added things to cart maybe, but not purchased. You can let your product catalog do a lot of the heavy lifting there. But definitely most of the focus is on that new for the newer brands, of course.
We also talk always about scrappy content. We just finished saying how you only need your iPhone to make a lot of it, but you have a note here about how having polished studio like quality shots are also important to stand out.
Yeah. So, I mean, kind of leading more onto the, I guess, retargeting side, that 10% you're spending at the start, it does help like to have, a few shots that have maybe been taken in the studio, some nicely put together consumer generated content, because once you get them in through that scrappy, the style, if they haven't actually purchased, there's a reason for that. And sometimes you need that stuff. So it's not like, again, you need to just go heavy into invest hard into that, but just getting at least a few pieces of that at the start is great.
Very cool. Okay, well, so the reason why I wanted to call it Oopsies, I just did a podcast with Jess from Feastables, and she actually has a podcast called Oopsies that's just all about learning from the mistakes we all make as marketers. And I think it's important to point out that in this field versus any other, you got to have a bias towards action, and that's going to mean that mistakes are made. And that's sort of a really big part of this industry. So in terms of Oopsies, what Oopsies do you see with some of these early stage brands?
Yes, I mean, the first one probably is just not adding enough contrast into those tests, like especially when you're just starting to spend on, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever it may be. You really want to get different styles of creators, different styles of shots, lifestyle shots, different people holding the product, different color schemes. Don't be dedicated to only your brand colors on day one. Is maybe a big one that, as a new brand, one of your advantages is you're still kind of figuring out what consumers are reacting to. Don't just go in with, here's our goals, here's our brand colors, work within these restrictions. That is a huge roadblock as someone coming in and wanting to spend with us. That's a new brand. That's it's going to be hard to make that work. You're just assuming that, this is going to work at the masses, right?
It's a needle in the haystack, and you're starting with only a needle, right? You're just not quite a needle in a haystack, but yeah, you're not, if you have very predefined ideas of what's going to work, that just limits your opportunities on these platforms so much.
For sure, yeah. And there's ways to, maybe keep within brand colors while still testing other, ideas, colors, but Yeah, I mean, just overall that notion of adding a lot of contrast into those tests, and then starting to pursue what works a little more as you learn, would be the first kind of oopsie, where a lot of people don't really do that.
One adjustment that we made a few years ago creatively in how we speak to our clients that I feel like has been a big help internally, but if I was a brand, I would adopt this too, is when thinking about brand decisions, especially brand decisions related to meta content, think about what's like critical and not critical. Like, what is the thing that we will absolutely not publish this on Meta versus like, you know what, realistically, it doesn't matter if this gets, a couple thousand impressions and we cut it. Like critical versus non-critical is a really important way to think when you're, chatting with your design team or whatever your design resources are and making brand decisions.
Yeah. It's not forever. It's just for the news feed.
Yeah. Doesn't matter. People don't care.
That's true.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
What else? What other oopsies are we seeing from early stage clients?
Yeah. So if you're starting to spend on ads, a big oopsie is not thinking about the pages, not using page testing tools, not having something like maybe Hotjar set up that, gives you heat maps. A lot of, advertisers will just come in and try to figure out the right ads, but the website's crap or the website isn't optimized. And really that's half the work once, you get people to the site. So you do want to start with, using a tool that you can split test pages, through your ads rather than having two different campaigns with two different budgets going to two different pages. You can have one campaign that is in the back end split testing to 2-3 pages. And you can start to learn like, okay, our new customers like to go to our product page. Our, existing customers like to go to this page. And doing that right from the start again is just ensuring you're not, wasting any budget. You're learning from everything, even stuff that's not getting you sales. And yeah, just again, that's an oopsie a lot of new brands make. They focus too much on the ads themselves, whereas that's really half the job.
I remember a graphic that Cam made one time about the post-click experience being, the whole underside of the iceberg, essentially.
Yeah, I think that's that's a topic for another podcast. But I was going to make a comment too. I think, your Shopify site is such a crucial part of like the customer experience coming from Meta, that I think at least thinking about what you're doing on your Shopify site to increase trust is like obviously an important question to be asking yourself on the brand side. I'm sure everyone's doing that in some capacity, but I think like having high quality content on your Shopify store is just like no brainer. If you're a brand, you have to do it.
Totally. You've got a note here also about cutting tests too early with limited budgets. How do you gauge that?
I mean, yeah, that's a tough one. So if you have like a $50 product and, you're testing all these different pieces of content, a lot of brands will spend maybe like $30 on an ad and be like, okay, it's not working. They cut it, like move on, they try something else. But like really you need to think 2 to 3 times your price of your product, $150 maybe you spend, because there's a chance like 1 to 2 sales will come in pretty quick, especially, 3-ish days after you launch a new test, because there is a bit of, delayed attribution happening. You got to let data settle. You got to let it, momentum pick up. So yeah, they'll cut the test, they'll move on, when really, 2 days later, all of a sudden a couple purchases will fire back and they'll be like, oh, like maybe there's potential here, and they'll have to turn it back on, or they just don't even notice that. You're missing a lot of opportunities. So really thinking about the price of your product and like 2 to 3 times that at least on like a specific piece of content, I'd say is a good control. And every brand's different. If you have a $10,000 product, obviously you can't spend $10,000 on an ad, but that is not going to work. But then you start to look at other metrics like add to cart rates, initiate checkouts, and okay, for $300, like a few people have added it to cart. There is other ways to look at that, of course, but don't just rely on the first like $5 or $10, which kind of leads into another oopsie. It's like, don't pay too much attention to the day-to-day versus the week-to-week, especially a new brand trying to compete with the big guys. You're going to need to get all this stuff we just talked about, build in, dial into what angles are working, dial into your messaging, your new versus existing customers. Really the week to week, you need to make sure that at least you're, making progress. You're learning something each week. Your return is hopefully going in the right direction. Whereas a lot of new brands will get hyper focused, day to day, sending urgent messages. And there is definitely a process there. And you got to be a little patient, and you do need a little bit of, budget to start up for sure.
Can you talk a little bit? You mentioned about having 2 to 3 times your CPA in budget for individual pieces of content that you're testing. And then how does that roll up to how you think about your meta campaign setup? Within how do you think about how many ads to have within your ad sets in your campaigns, for instance?
So typically if we have, let's say we have like 5 different angles we want to test, and each of those angles have, 5 different pieces of content. We'll kind of format the campaign so that it spends maybe like $5 a day on each piece of content, but $50 a day on each angle type thing. Let that run 3 to 5 days. Each angle gets, $150, $200 a spend. Within that, you can kind of see which ads are getting the love basically from Facebook, the community. And then from there, it's essentially like moving those out of the test campaigns and throwing more budget at them. So there, if you have 50 pieces of content, there is a balance. You can't spend $50 on each one necessarily, but you need to bucket them at least to angles. But within those angles, you still want like variety for sure.
Sounds like the pilot test, which is what we talk about again and again as the way to get a great reading from these platforms. And I think the biggest issue that if you can avoid these mistakes and you can put into effect some of these opportunities that we mentioned, it won't feel like you're spinning your wheels. I feel like that's the biggest fear that a lot of advertisers come into Meta with, is especially going up against these competitors that are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a day sometimes, that you'll just be kind of spending into the void, spinning your wheels and not seeing any real traction. So I guess these tips are meant to avoid that feeling.
For sure, yeah. Yeah, these are really to make you hit the ground on a somewhat even playing field. And, at the end of the day, the product still needs to be a good product, or, even if you're getting sales, that's going to fizzle out pretty quick if the bad reviews start coming in, Facebook doesn't like your product. So there is an oopsie there, sort of, where a lot of brands will rely solely on the ads, not pay attention to the page, which I mentioned, but also not pay attention to the product, not even worry about, new releases this year, new like sale promotions to launch seasonally, like all that, of course, has to be a part of your plan. Yeah.
And that initial product market fit, which is, without that these days, it will be harder and harder to make it scale. That's for sure. Nice. Cool. Well, good luck with the pilot program. I know you guys keep churning along. If anyone in the audience wants to know about the pilot program, just fill out a form on pilothouse.co and you'll eventually get in touch with Jacob. But thanks for coming on today, guys.
Awesome. Yeah. Happy to be here. It was great.
See you at Ball Hockey, Cam.
Oh, we forgot to mention in the intro, you're talking about hockey. Jacob just won our fantasy pool.
Did he?
Just a cool $500.
Not bad.
Second place last year, first place this year.
You had McDavid probably, right?
No, I had McDavid. Somehow I didn't win.
Who were your horses, Jacob?
Pastrnak or whatever, David
Pastrnak.
And then the Tkachuk brothers, I had both of them. And then
oh my God,
I had a few, Timo Meyer and like JT Miller and stuff. But
Jacob, you're good at having no emotion about your players. Like if you have a good player, like ranked high, and like there's some like opportunity cost situation happening, you're just like, fuck this guy. You drop him, you pick up whoever is like the highest ranked player. It seems to work out really well for you.
Probably,
which is why he's so good at the pilot test, which is why he just does, he doesn't get emotionally attached to his angles, just goes with what works best. We could tie this right in. Declan, keep it.
It's all related. Yeah. Fantasy buying.
Nice.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's I enjoy that league though. It's fun.
Nice.
Sweet.
Well, I'll enter it next year and see if I can compete. Until
we're
then,
actually looking for guys.
Okay. And at ball hockey. So if you're in Victoria, we're always looking for extras at ball hockey. But as we say in ball hockey, there's no coasting like in regular hockey. So no, we're just on our 2 feet in a heartbeat, buddy.
That's
no
fun.
coasting in ball hockey.
Yeah, I need to come up one time, join some of these sports.
No coasting in performance advertising, just to tie it back in. One final thing. Thanks, guys. Bye. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you're not getting the D2C newsletter, you can subscribe for free at directtoconsumer.co. And if you want to learn more about Pilothouse's all-killer, no-filler services, take off to pilothouse.co. I'm Eric Dick, and this has been the D2C Podcast. We'll see you next time.